Hi everyone, my name is Shannon and I'm back with you again to do another craft video. We are going to be using an essential skill today, and that skill is sewing. So we are going to make a stuffed cat out of a pair of socks, and we'll just need a few other different materials for this project. Sewing is a skill that I think everybody should have. You never know when you are going to have to fix a pair of pants or sew a button back on to one of your pieces of clothing, and it helps us to be less wasteful so we are not just throwing something away if it gets ripped. And it's also a way for us to show our creativity and have some fun. As always, you can pause the video at any point, go back if you need to, if I'm going too quickly or you need to see something again. Just remember that you can go at your own pace for this project. It can be a little bit challenging at times, and it will take longer than the 20-minute video. That's totally fine. I will have some parts where I'm speeding up my sewing and things like that. So I hope that you enjoy and have fun making this adorable little cat. So these are the materials that we are going to use for our project today. We are going to have a piece of paper just to practice our pattern on. We'll also need a Sharpie. We'll need a pair of good scissors, your pair of socks, some cotton batting, some thread, and a needle. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to flip our socks inside out. And the reason that we're going to do this is so that all of our markings and things are on the inside of our socks and we won't see them on our final project. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to use my Sharpie and my scrap paper to trace the outline of my sock, just so I can practice where I'm going to cut before I do my pattern so that I'm not wasting any materials. So for this one, I'm going to just stretch it out, make sure there's no indents, and then I'm going to place it on my paper. It does not have to be all the way because we're not going to use this part of the sock. So I'm going to very carefully just trace about how big my sock is. And then I will do that again because I'm going to be cutting both socks. Oops. It might be easier to just hold your sock down so it doesn't move. All right. So there is my two socks, and this is how I'm going to cut them, okay? So I am going to draw one cut line here and one cut line at the top. And then from here we need to make two V's. This is going to make the body and the legs of the cat. So it doesn't have to be perfect, just do your best. But it should look about like that. So one sock is going to become the body and the legs, and then the other sock is going to become the head. So for this part, we are going to just draw a V, just like that. And when we cut that part out, it will become the ears and the head of the cat. We're also going to use this top part here for the tail. So now that I've made kind of my pattern idea of what I would like to use for my sock, I am going to trace it onto the actual sock so that I can cut it out. So I'm going to do this one first. Even when we are doing videos, we sometimes make mistakes. That's why it's really good that we're doing this on the inside of the sock. For this one, because we want to have this seam, this line on the front of their face, you're actually going to fold the sock the other way. So instead of it being flat with the seam like this, you're going to pull it across like that, so that it's like the side of your foot. Sorry about that. No, it's no problem though, because this is all on the inside, we won't see it. So from here, we're going to make our V. So you'll just have to remember, hopefully you didn't make the same mistake that I did, but if you did, that is all right. Just make sure that you cut this one. So I might just add some little lines so I know that that is the one that I have to cut. And now I'm going to use my scissors to cut my pieces. So now we have our body and our legs piece, we have our head piece, and we have our piece for our tail. What we're going to do now is we are going to be threading our needle. So this is something that takes some practice. It can be tricky, and that is okay. The first thing you're going to do is get your thread ready to go. So you want to have enough thread that you're not going to run out right away, but you don't want to have so much that you're going to get all tangled. So I usually start with about 4 pulls of the thread bobbin and then give it a nice cut. It's important that when you are cutting thread that you use really good scissors and make sure that it's a nice clean cut so that it doesn't get stuck in the needle. So what you need to do now is you need to thread your needle. This is tricky for a lot of people. It just takes time and it just takes practice. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your thread and you have your needle. Take just a teeny piece out and put it through the hole of the needle. Usually takes a couple of times, and then you can start pulling it until your thread is right in half. So I'm using quite a long piece of thread, and that's completely fine. Like I said, you don't want it to be so long that it's going to get all tangled up, but you also don't want it to be too short, because then you have to change your thread often, and that is kind of tedious and annoying. So I have my needle and thread. I need to tie my knot, so I am going to wrap it around my finger and then pull it through. And I usually do this 2 or 3 times so that the thread does not come through our material. So that's 2, and we'll do 1 more. So wrap it around, pull it through. It's just a simple knot like that, and then you will have your little knot. When you're sewing, you always want to start your sewing inside out. And the reason that we do this is so that the thread and your stitches aren't shown as much. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by sewing up the legs. We'll start with these legs here. You have the heel of your sock right there to make kind of the bottom. So these are the front legs. So to start our blanket stitch, we're going to go through and pull it all the way through till the knot. And your knot should be secure enough that it won't go through. Then you are going to put the needle back on the same side that you just did. So we went in, we're going to then go in again. And you need it to be pretty close to the other stitch. And you're going to pull, and it will make a loop. Now what makes this a blanket stitch is that it goes through the thread that you just had, so it will make it extra secure. And you pull it just like that, and you can see that it is completely done. So I'll do that again. You always start at the top. If you're holding it this way, you pull it all the way through until it gets almost to the end, and then put your needle through the loop and pull until it's tight. So I'm going to keep doing those blanket stitches all the way around until we get to this part. This might happen where your thread starts to get a little bit tangled. Don't pull on it super hard or force it through. You just have to gently pull it and see if you can get that knot out. So it shouldn't be a very tight knot. It's usually just a very small tangle. Just like that, I got it out, no problem. Just take your time. This will take you some practice, especially if you haven't done it before. Okay, so I have made it to the end of my stitching. I've done stitching along here, through the V, and then along the top. So what I need to do now is I need to do my final stitch and tie my knot so that I can move on to the other side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the top, do my last stitch, and then when I get to the loop part, I'm going to put it through once, and then I'm going to put it through one more time, and this will tie a knot in my thread. This is important because if you just cut it, it could just come loose. So it makes a little knot, and then you can pull and cut your thread. Now the front of our cat is done, and we can flip it over and start doing the back. Because we have cut our thread, we need to tie another knot. So we're going to tie our knot in our thread. So you're going to use the same stitch. You're going to pull it all the way through to start, and then go through the top again, make a loop, put your needle through the loop, and again this is called a blanket stitch, and it's a good one because it makes it really secure. So start from the top, pull it through, and then make sure your thread is inside your loop. So while I'm sewing the legs of this cat, I thought that we could talk about different projects that you could do with sewing. There are lots of really cool things that you can do with just a needle and thread. So if you find this project is something that you enjoy, something that you like doing, then you could certainly look online and get some more ideas. I like to use Pinterest to find different patterns. That's where I found a pattern that was similar to this cat and kind of adapted it to make it my own. And using socks is also a really cool way to start because it's fairly inexpensive. You can use a pair of mismatched socks. I know we all have socks lying around the house that used to have a match and it somehow disappeared in the laundry. And even if sewing is not your thing and you still like the idea of making little stuffed animals and things like that, there's lots of no-sew sock projects as well. So like I said, this does take a little bit of time. I have done across the top and down the side, and now I'm just going on to the other side. So you just have to be patient. Sometimes I like to sew with a movie on, or listening to some music or a podcast. There's lots of different choices. It's also quite relaxing, I find, to just sit down and do something creative. I find it stress relieving most of the time when things are going right, and it is a fun hobby to have. So we have sewn all the way along the side into the V, and now we have this part open. And then we've also sewn on the whole of this side. So what we need to do now is we need to flip it inside out. And so how you're going to do that is you're going to leave your needle and thread attached, because you will need it later, and you're going to very carefully put your thumbs into the open space and start pulling it inside out. So you'll get to see all of your little bit of stitching. Take your time, you don't want to rip it, and we left a pretty small hole so that we'll have less to sew up on the outside. But you just have to work your fingers through to get your arms and legs and body through. Okay, so we can see we've got some little paws and our back legs. So this is the body of our cat. our front paws, our little back paws, the bottom, and then the spot where we are going to put our stuffing in. So this is stuffing or batting, and it's what's inside of pillows or other stuffed animals. And the way that we're going to stuff it is we're going to take a little bit at a time and put it into the hole. You want to go pretty slow. Again, you don't want to rip any of your stitching. So I'm just using my thumb and pushing it into the legs first. The more stuffing you add, the thicker it will be. It's entirely up to you how you want to have your cat stuffed. So I'm just using my thumb again, adding some stuffing into the legs. And I'm just going to keep stuffing it until the whole body is full, the other leg is full, and then we'll do this part together. Once you've done that, you can continue doing your little blanket stitch. And this part of the stitching will be on the outside, but that's okay. So just take your time, go all the way around until you have a completely closed paw. If you want to fold in your edges so it's a little bit of a cleaner sew, you can do that too. You can very carefully tuck them in so that it will be sewn like the other side. I have sewn off my little paw. Just add in my stuffed bits so that I've got my cat body. And there it is. It's kind of arched even like a cat. So now that I'm at the end, I need to make sure that I tie that knot. So I'll pull it through and then go through in the loop 1, 2 times and pull. Then you can take your scissors and snip, and your cat body is done. Okay, so now that we've done the cat body, we need to do the head. And so what we're actually going to do first is we are going to flip it right side out, and we're going to add on the eyes and the nose and the whiskers, just because that will be a little bit easier to do when it's not stuffed yet. So you have a couple of different choices on how you want to do the face. You can sew it, which is what I'm going to do, or if you wanted to just use a Sharpie, you could do that as well. So I flip it right side out again. I can tell that it's right side out because of the seam on the toe of the sock. And I'm just going to draw a little pattern of what I want my cat face to look like. So I'm just going to use my Sharpie to have 2 eyes, a nose, and a little mouth. And then if I want to add some whiskers, I will do that just with thread. So because I'm doing smaller details, I don't want to have too long of a thread. So I'm going to just use a little bit, and I'm actually going to double this thread. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it in half, and I'm going to put both ends of the thread through the needle. And then when I fold it in half again, I will have 4 strands of thread, and that will just make it a little bit thicker and it won't take as long. So it's a little bit harder to thread 2 threads through a needle because it's thicker, but just remember, have that really fine edge and then thread your needle through. I'm going to start doing the face, and so I'm going to start from the underneath side, so the knot is on the inside of the cat, and we're going to be using a running stitch, which means going in and out, because if I was to start at the same side again, it would create a loop and it would just be a big mess. So I'm going to do small stitches in and out, just to fill in this cat eye. I'm just going to keep going with my running stitch in and out until all of my Sharpie is covered by thread. So now that I've finished one eye, I'm going to go over to the other eye. You don't even have to take the thread apart. You can just go right onto the next eye. Just don't pull too hard on the string so it doesn't get wrinkled. I'll show you what I mean. So I'll just start on my next eye. And it should just be straight in there, because if you pull it, it will wrinkle at the front. So just straight, and that should be no problem. There's my kitten's eyes. They look a little wonky on this side. I might try and fix that by going over it a couple more times just to make it smooth. But there's the eyes. So now I'm going to keep going and do the exact same thing with the nose, and then we'll do the mouth together. All right, so now that my nose is done, I'm just going to follow with a single running stitch down the length of my nose into the mouth. So I'm just going to go up on my pattern and then down and pull it through, and it will just make a line. So there's my little cat face. If you want to add whiskers, this is what you can do. You don't have to take your needle and thread out of the fabric. You can just go right next to the nose and do one running stitch that's kind of long. And I'm going to do that 3 times on each side to make little whiskers. So now you're going to look at your thread on the inside. It looks a bit of a mess, but that is okay because no one will see it. It's on the inside. So then to tie off your knot, you're going to find a stitch. It doesn't matter which one. You're going to put your needle through the stitch, put it through the loop, and pull, and that will knot off your thread, and you can cut it. So now that our little cat's face is all done, we are going to sew up the head. So we're going to go back to the thread that you were using to do the body. So for me, that was my white thread. I'm going to take the black thread off of the needle and I am going to put the white thread on, and then I'm going to flip my cat face inside out again so that all of our seams and all of our sewing will be on the inside. We're going to start at the top of one ear and go all the way down to the base of the second ear, and that's when we'll flip it inside out and add more stuffing. We're going to be doing the same stitch that we were doing before, which is the blanket stitch. And so I'm going to start by putting my needle through right at the top, and it might be kind of pointy, but that's okay. And then I go around to the same side. And I'm going to continue doing that stitch all the way down the ear. So I've gone all down the side with my blanket stitch, and now I'm going to go up to about here, just so I have a little bit of space to add in the stuffing. So I'm still going to be going from the top and down. So I'm going to keep stitching until I have about 1 or 2 finger lengths left at the end, and that's when we will flip it inside out and put the stuffing in. So I'm going to leave my thread attached, and I'm going to carefully flip it inside out so that we can put the stuffing in. And remember just to go really slow with this process so that it doesn't rip. I'm going to take some of my stuffing and just a little bit at a time fill up the head of my cat. So I just hold the opening and then put it in with my thumb. And you want to kind of push it as far as you need to get into the corners of the ears, and then you can go down from there. Remember, this project is definitely a much longer one than last time and will probably take you over an hour, I would say. So you don't have to do it all at once. You can always pause the video, come back to it after you take a break, or you can do it all in one setting. It's entirely up to you. So as you go, every 2 or 3 stitches, just make sure that it's folded. And then you can add a little bit more stuffing to finish off your cat. So I'm going to add a little bit more stuffing just into this ear, because this ear is very stuffed and this side isn't. So add a little bit more, do another couple stitches, and then add a bit more just to finish it off. So I'm going really small with my stitches so you can't see them. You can either do the running stitch or you can do the blanket stitch, just as long as they're super small. So I did my little knot. I'm going to cut as close as I can to the edge, and there's my little cat head. You can wiggle the stuffing around inside just to get it all even if you'd like. And there's our little cat. So now we have our cat body and our cat head, and we need to connect them. So what we're going to do is we are going to use a running stitch to carefully secure the head onto the body. So I still have quite a bit of thread on my needle. So I'm just going to tie another knot just so that it doesn't pull through. I always do 2 or 3 just to be sure. And then we are going to just carefully sew on the head. And I'm then going to take my needle and go through the body and into the head, which sounds terrible, but that's what we're going to do, just so that now it's on. And we just have to do another stitch so that it will be secure. And then I'm just going to use my needle to go back through the body about here and just pull it so it is in like that, and then pull, and that will secure it on. And and that will secure it on. And you're just going to keep doing that, going through the body, through the head, and then through the body, just like that. So you're just going to keep going through the head, through the body, gently, until you go all the way around the head. So I'm going to go through the head and pull. If it gets caught on the legs, just untangle it. Through the head, pull, through the body, and pull all the way around, just to tack it on so it doesn't fall off. Then I've got my little loop, so I'm going to put my needle through the loop twice and pull to make my knot, and then I can just cut it off. And the last thing that we have to do is add our tail. So we still have this heel of a sock left. So what we're going to do is we are going to cut it one more time along the seam. And then we're just going to sew it up just like we've done with all of our other things. I'm going to cut the seam off. So that it will make like a rectangle. And this will be the cat's tail. So now I'm going to use my blanket stitch and I'm going to go all the way down one side and then all the way down the other side. And we're not going to stuff this because cats don't have thick tails typically. So I've sewn up the side and I've sewn up this side, so I have about a finger length left that hasn't been sewn. So just like everything else, we're going to flip it inside out so that we can have all of the sewing and all the raw edges on the inside. So I've got it like that, and then I can use my Sharpie to very carefully push it through. We don't have to stuff this just because it's pretty thick already. If you'd like to, you totally can. And then we are going to sew it onto our cat. And then you're going to do just like you did with the head, where you put it through the tail, then the body, tail, body, tail, body, tail, body, until it is completely secured on. So I'm just going to do that right now. Tail is just about completely sewn on. I'll just do a couple more stitches just to be sure. And then our cat is completely finished. Do one more stitch. And then I'll put my needle through the loop. And one more time, just to secure it. Make my little knot, and then I can cut my thread. So here's our cat. It's all finished now. It has a tail and a cute little face. It'll sit up all on its own, and that's it. That's our craft for this week. So I hope that you had fun, you learned some new skills, and I will see you next time. Bye!